Happy to. Thank you, Anita, and welcome everyone, and thank you for inviting us. As Anita told you, I'm your local Sadlier sales rep, so if you want samples or free digital trials, or if you hear something that you're interested that Kathy talks about today, and you want more information about anything, I'm the one you contact, and I'll put my contact information in the chat box. But right now, I want to introduce Kathy Hendricks, who is one of Sadlier's national religion consultants. Among her most recent contributions with Sadlier, Kathy was very instrumental in helping develop our newest religion series, Christ in Us. And Kathy's also an author and a national speaker. She's published many books on a whole host of faith topics. And she's worked with parishes and Catholic schools across the country for many, many years. And Kathy's coming to us from her home in Colorado. So welcome, Kathy, and welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Laurel. And it's so great to be with you. I'm thinking it would be so nice to be there in person because I have been to Ogdensburg. It's been several years, but I know how beautiful it is there. So, and I hope you're having a beautiful day. I know a lot of crazy weather is hitting the East Coast. I hate to tell you, but it's gorgeous here in Colorado. So beautiful sunny morning here. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this will, you can all see that. Is that showing up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as Laurel said, or Anita said, I think there was a presentation. I know she attended the Digital Catechesis seminar that Sadlier sponsored a couple months ago, and I was on board for it, but I'm not a digital catechesis expert. So we do have, but I am, when I talked to Anita and talked to Laura about this, we agreed that what we wanted to do today was really look at the way the directory for catechesis embraces digital catechesis and explains it. And so that's kind of going to be my focus today. So what we'll do is I have some things I want to present, and then we're going to break into smaller groups to do some discussion, and we'll come back. And so I'm going to kind of give you an overview a little bit of what the directory is talking about with catechesis, the ups and downs of that in terms of digital technology, and then look at how it can be applied. And, and I hope that this is just kind of a platform to jump off on for all of you, because I think we're all learning how this works and how we can, I think we're discovering, really, not just even learning, but we're discovering a lot of possibilities here. And we're also discovering what isn't working. And so I think that's just as valuable. So we'll move into that. And as I said, go ahead and put anything in the chat box that if things come up, or if you have a question, and just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask, because I may not see that your hand up or something, but just so that we don't, I don't barrel along without you being involved. This is the downside of digital technology and Zoom, because if we were in a room together, I could see all of you, and I'm limited in that way. So I'd like to start with an opening prayer. Several years ago, I wrote a little booklet for 23rd Publications called Prayers for Catechists. And I was leafing through it, and I thought this one seemed like a nice prayer to start our day. I did send this as a handout to Anita, so she can send this out to all of you after the presentation today. And feel free to use this with anyone that you're working with in your parishes. But we turn to the Holy Spirit and ask for grace, in our session today, but in all our catechetical efforts, particularly as we look forward to a new catechetical year. So I'll read this, and then if you could join in with the portions that are in italics, that would be great. Okay, so let's just take a moment to allow ourselves to embrace the presence of the Holy Spirit among us this morning. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, and fill my heart with your grace. Grant me the gift of organization so that I craft a well-structured yet flexible lesson. Grant me the gift of knowledge so that I echo the message of Christ with fidelity and conviction. Grant me the gift of resourcefulness so that I utilize
materials with creativity
and imagination. Grant me the gift of presence so that I listen with
respect and sensitivity to those in my care.
Grant me the gift of holiness so that I ground each catechetical task in prayer
and offer it
in love. Come, Holy Spirit, and fill my heart with your grace. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So to begin, I want to, I'm going to launch a poll here and just invite you to respond. Do you consider yourself to be a digital native or a digital immigrant? So go ahead and make a response there. Great. See that filling in here. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, great. So we've got more immigrants than natives here.
I want to stay an immigrant.
Stay an immigrant, yeah. It's a great term. It appears in the directory, but it's not something that the directory came up with. These are really terms that are describing our situation today. So the next question I have, and maybe since the chat box is working, just kind of, which of these digital technologies are you using in your catechetical ministry? You may be using some of them for your personal, digital interactions, but if you could put in the chat box, which of these are you using? Social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, other, all sorts of social media platforms, texts or emails, online forums like this, if you are using those or have used those in catechesis, blogs, podcasts, streaming. You may not be generating podcasts, but maybe, or blogs, but you might be sharing those, or any online resources that you use or share, or gaming. So let me just kind of look at what we're seeing. Okay, social media, certainly texting. Great, John, wow. That's fabulous, yeah. All except blogs and gaming from Anne, all right. Zoom from Anita, yeah. Lots of possibilities. Kathy uses text, email, and a program that was set up by our Darien diocese. That's great. One of the things that I think is so fabulous is the ability to create an email list or a text list and just send it out to parents. I so wish I'd had that technology when I was a catechetical leader. So, and I know that we keep, learning how to do these, and a lot of them, I think, we all had a crash course in digital technology this past year. People that didn't know what streaming was learned very quickly how to stream liturgies, for example, sometimes with mixed results. I've heard some pretty funny stories about it. But so let's look at, this is really the technology, the technical definitions of a digital native and a digital immigrant. And a digital native is considered a person who was born or brought up during the digital technology and therefore are very familiar with computers and internet from an early age. This is my grandson, Clay, who is definitely a digital native. He learned how to take the remote and hold it up to the TV. And also, there he is with my iPad. He also, one day I saw him using his little finger to try to swipe the screen. And this was before he was 1 year old. So, I mean, it's, this is like his language already. On the other hand, the digital immigrant is someone who was raised prior to the digital age. These individuals, often in the Generation X or generations and older, did not grow up with computing or the internet. And so, and I'm in that category, obviously. So we've had to adapt to new language in the practice of digital technologies. And as I was putting together this PowerPoint, which I so love, I so love PowerPoint, I was thinking about my earliest days in presenting to groups and how I used overhead transparencies. And I was so excited when I was able to make a digital transparency with color on it. And, I mean, there are people today don't even know what overhead transparencies are, or, we are people that are just kind of continuing to learn. And it's really, when I think of the technologies that have developed just within the past 5 years, it's just truly amazing. And so we have, as I said, had to learn a lot of, digital immigrants had to learn very quickly how to adapt to new technologies, and how we did that around gathering our community during a time of restrictions when we couldn't be together. And that really kind of flies in the face of what we mean by catechesis. And certainly our liturgical life. I mean, it was really a trauma, I think, for our communities. So opting out is no longer feasible. And the new directory, which came out earlier in the year or last year, is really reinforcing this. Now, Pope John Paul II was one of the first, I think, to draw attention to these new technologies as part of his view of the new evangelization. But we are continuing to unpack what this means. And so in the directory, it speaks to the reality of digital technology. In chapter 10, most of these quotes that I'm taking from the directory come from chapter 10, which deals with digital catechesis. Speaks about the introduction of digital tools, and their use on a massive scale has caused profound and complex changes on many levels, with cultural, social, and psychological consequences that are not yet entirely evident. The digital, therefore, is not only a part of the existing cultures, but is asserting itself as a new culture, changing language, shaping mentalities, and restructuring value hierarchies. And when you think of that, the changing of language, the terms that we use now just as part of daily conversation. I'll Google that, I'll text you, all of these are, it's a new language that we weren't using, years ago. So it's, and one of the things that I really appreciate is that the church has always kind of moved, sometimes slowly, but with new technologies. And so there hasn't been a complete shutdown or, we can't, there's never been a Luddite sort of, which is no new changes, nothing. There's always been kind of an openness in some ways. So the directory looks at some of its positive attributes One of which is, it says, in the directory, among the more positive elements is the extension and enrichment of human cognitive capacities. Digital technology can assist the memory, for example, through the tools of data acquisition, archiving, and retrieval. The digital collection of data and the tools of support for decision-making improve the capacity of choice and allow the collection of more information in order to evaluate implications in various areas. In various regards, one can speak positively of a digital enhancement. And this is really, pretty amazing when you think of all the information that we have at our fingertips. Our family kind of jokes when we're having a meal together or something, and someone will say, is so-and-so still alive? Or, what was the name of that film? And then someone will we'll just pull up our phone and look that up. And I mean, that's a little bit of a trivia, but when I think about, I'm still, even though I'm retired from Sadler, as I mentioned earlier, I am still writing for Sadler right now. I'm helping to write the 7th and 8th grade material for our new series, Christ in Us. And it's amazing to bring up, yesterday I wrote something about novenas, and I was just bringing up some information on the internet and beautiful access right away to all sorts of, not only what is a novena, but various types of novenas, and just wonderful. So it's, as a writer, it's just fabulous. And I think for us as catechists, that's so great. But there's also some downsides to this. As the directory said, one, however, must recognize that the digital environment is also one of loneliness, manipulation, exploitation, and violence, even to the extreme case of the dark web, which in itself sounds frightening to me. The potential for exploitation, isolation, manipulation, misinformation, and a diminishment of the interior life is something that we can all be understandably wary about. And that word misinformation really jumps out at me, because we're hearing a lot about that these days with COVID. The misinformation around vaccinations is literally killing people, and this is frightening. And so I think part of our role in catechesis, when I started out doing my work in consulting and going around the country giving talks, one of the topics that was very relevant and very popular was media education, and being media savvy. And this is really part of our catechetical calling, is to, I think, digital knowledge. How do we use these tools so that we are building up the kingdom of God and not being destructive? And that is really vital. Several years ago, there was a book that came out called Hamlet's Blackberry, A Practical Philosophy for Building a Good Life in the Digital Age. It was by William Powers. So it was a fascinating book, because the digital, technological world was really just kind of expanding, and yet the title is already dated, The Blackberry. And yet in this book, what he wrote about, he said that today we're always just a few taps away from millions of other people, from endless information and stimulation, family and friends, work and play, news and ideas. Sometimes it seems everything we care about has moved to the digital room. So we spend our days there living in this new ultra-connected way. It's a lot of work, managing all this connectedness, the emails, texts, and voicemails, the pokes, prods, and tweets, the alerts and comments, the links, tags, and posts, the photos and videos, the blogs and blogs, the searches, downloads, uploads, files and folders, feeds and filters, walls and widgets, tags and clouds, the usernames, passcodes, and access keys, pop-ups and banners, ringtones and vibrations. That's just a small sample of what we navigate each day in this room. By the time you read this, there will be completely new modes of connecting that are all the rage. Our tools are fertile and constantly multiplying. And what he talked about in this book was the importance of disengaging from it so that we don't lose our sense of connectedness, interpersonal connectedness with, as well as our own deep interior selves. And we've certainly seen this up close this past year and a half. Everything from the live streaming of liturgy to Zoom classes have allowed us, on the one hand, to remain in touch with people, which has been really good. And I would say in my own life, I'm also a certified spiritual director, and I've been able to maintain the spiritual direction because we, in the midst of the pandemic, my husband and I moved here to be closer to our daughter and her family. So we sold a house during the pandemic and bought another one and moved through this whole thing. And yet I've been able to not only keep up with my directees through Zoom, but I picked up a new directee this past year with whom I would not have been able to connect if it had not been for the internet. So that's really been wonderful. But along with this has come this major challenge to the kind of face-to-face interaction that characterizes the art of accompaniment that is key to part of the catechetical vision. So it's interesting to note that this whole section on digital catechesis in the new directory is placed within a broader context of culture and interreligious relations. And that's what chapter 10 is. When you go into chapter 10, it does not start with digital catechesis. It starts with culture. And so in looking at the difference between digital natives and digital immigrants, the directory speaks of what is called a larger anthropological transformation. And so the approach that they have in the directory towards the new technologies and their use. As the directory states, there's also a difference in the style of discourse, which in the digital native is more spontaneous, interactive, and participatory. The native is very comfortable on this land. They're born into it. But for the immigrant, it's a lot more dicey. And so what's happening with this is it's leading to new ways of learning, of accessing information, and of relating to others. And the directory names some of these. For example, the digital native prefers images over listening, which calls for producing a new language and ways of organizing thoughts. It's a different way to catechize than we have been used to. And we've certainly had to take that into account as a publisher at Sadlier, because, our books tend to be, very text heavy, even though I think Sadlier's always had a beautiful design, with lots of images, but it's even more important now to look at that. These digital natives, and we're looking at, all these younger people that you're catechizing, they're very adept at multitasking, at hypertextuality and interactivity, resulting in much more emotional and intuitive ways of learning versus the analytical. They're going to start with the personal and then go, and it's our job maybe to draw them into something a little bit more objective and, global, connect them to something larger than their own thoughts and opinions, for example. And this is one of the most interesting, that storytelling is preferred over traditional forms of discourse. As the directory said, the language that has the greatest hold on the digital generation is that of story rather than that of argumentation. Now, isn't that interesting? Because the Bible is a story. The Bible started off as oral storytelling, of course, as we know, and it's and so there's so many possibilities to move back to that. And the catechist as storyteller is really emphasized, not just in chapter 10, but there's a beautiful passage in the directory about the role and identity of the catechist, and one of them is as a storyteller. And so we start there with story, which is so valuable. So the challenges in terms of catechesis for this group is also laid out. As the directory says, this innovation in digital language makes one a consumer and not a decoder of messages. And what can happen with that is anything goes mentality. My story becomes the story. And we're certainly seeing a rise in this. Is how many pundits are there out there now who interpret the story through a purely subjective lens? You look at this tragedy unfolding in Afghanistan, for example, or the COVID pandemic, and you can watch MSNBC and get their story, or you can watch Fox News and get their story. And it's all through a lens of one's preference. And so we're dividing more and more into camps. What it's, of course, creating is tremendous polarization, which is increasing at an alarming rate in our culture. And as a result, the capacity for empathy, for understanding, and compassion gives way then to my views, my rights, and my opinions. And it also renders truth as malleable to one's own political, religious, or cultural group. Would alternative facts, for example, be seen as anything but laughable were it not for the power of digital, online, and virtual technology? We just, several years ago, that we just would never have thought of that. So the need to move to this new technology within catechesis is undeniable. As the directory states, these horizons show how the digital and its tools are potent means for finding new and unprecedented forms of transmission of the faith. But it is also true that ecclesial action must make known the possible ambiguities of a language that is evocative, but hardly communicative of the truth. And so we have to constantly be pulling people back to some deeper realities. And I think part of that is our sense of the common good, our sense of solidarity, and particularly solidarity with those on the margins. And what I love and appreciate about the document is, as I said earlier, it's not a Luddite sort of thing. A reminder that a Luddite is a person who opposes new technologies or ways of working. So while laying out the challenges, the directory and the documents and statements of Popes John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and Pope Francis affirm the value of the digital age, and they also, and look at how challenges present new opportunities. And this is something that William Powers discussed in his book, Hamlet's Blackberry, by noting that every technological change in history, stretching back to the habit of solitary reading and the practice of writing something down on papyrus, has resulted in resistance as well as the opening of doors to something new. That there's always that tension, that there's some that are going to resist and say, oh my gosh, we shouldn't be, this is crazy, crazy, crazy. And others are saying, no, there's a lot to be discovered here. And so the same holds true for catechesis. Because if the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that we need these in-person experiences, or as the directory puts it, the pain, the fears, and the joys of others, and the complexity of their personal experiences. We need to continue to share those. So that's a real theoretical kind of look at the directory and around this chapter 10 in digital technology. So I'd like to stop here and invite us to move into some chat rooms here. Whoops. And just, here's just some thoughts, what ways are you seeing these digital technologies opening up new paths for faith formation, both in the parish and in the home? And you might be able to discuss how you've seen that roll out this past year. Some of the things that I've heard as I've moved around the country digitally this past year is that we've had a new way to break into faith formation in the home. How are we as catechists and catechetical leaders using technology or digital tools in a manner that's consistent with catechetical principles and gospel values? How have we met some of those challenges that the directory has laid out, and what gives you hope? Okay, do we have, just kind of see, I think we've got everybody back. Let's look at, maybe somebody from Breakout 1, if you can just share a little bit about anything that came up in your group conversationally around your experience with digital tools and catechesis and challenges you see in it, or hope. So somebody from Breakout 1.
Yes, one of the challenges that I've found is just in communication. We're using text and email. We have, I think, 161 parents that we send information out to, and you'd like to get a higher open rate. We're running at about 40%, which isn't too good because it's important information that we want for them for mass participation and also for their sacramental prep and stuff. So I think if it was strictly sacramental prep, they would be all over it and open. But we just do weekly things. But otherwise, there a lot of the parents really like the resources that we post and that we send to them. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
So. Yeah, and I was saying to my group, that's one thing that I've heard in kind of traveling virtually around the country this year is that we're reaching parents in a way we haven't before, which is really interesting. Some of you may be familiar with Sister Pat McCormick. She wrote a book called The Parking Lot Parent. And she's coming out with a third book around the parking lot parent. But it's such an interesting title, of the parent that drops the kid off. And now they couldn't drop them off because we're going right into the house. So that's,
one of our catechists, they're the two young boys who were confirmed 2 years ago, and they teach our fourth grade class. And they use Remind with their parents and kids, and they have a really good rapport.
Okay.
So that's another.
That's funny. I just heard of that yesterday. So
can you explain what that is? Remind? I haven't heard of that.
No, I don't. I've never used it. So they do, but
okay.
But I guess it's very simple. They use it in schools a lot.
Okay.
So. It's a texting program. So as a cat, it's almost just like having a group text that you have access to, but it's all set up for schools and parishes, and the catechist can send reminders out to the parents about what's coming up and things like that.
And I know their kids would, even when they had assignments, could even take pictures of it, whatever, and just send it right back to him, and then he would forward them to me. So it worked out pretty good. Just another tool.
Interesting. Wow, that's wonderful.
We use Flocknote in kind of the same way.
Flocknote, okay. Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Breakout 2, anybody from that group want to just share something from your conversation?
Well, sure, I will. I had with me Laurel and Ken Lucia, and I guess one of the downsides was they had their programs all set up. They had communication set up, but they didn't have a good response, similar to what John was saying. But of the participants who did participate, they found that the information was helpful and that the program actually worked for them, using the, drop-off material and then keeping in touch virtually and things like that. So I think our hope is that having gone through that last year, moving into this year, similar to what the kids experienced in school, that they will realize they do need the in-person, that they do need to participate, and that, we are doing the best we can, and we're here for them.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of our hope, that we get that message out, that it's still possible to do what we want to do and what we need to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Anita. Yeah. It's been an up and down. I mean, there's, and there have been challenges, to be sure. But do you think that you've reached some people that might not have otherwise been reached through some of the catechesis that you've done online?
I can't say it's for sure. I want to say that in my area, I think we did have some people that actually did participate because it was easier for them. We had some situations where they could just go online and look at the material. They didn't have to be in class at a particular time. So from that point of view, they weren't tied to, Sunday at 10 or Saturday at 11, and they could go on and do the material during the week and then regroup and go back. So from that point of view, there were some people that were able to participate.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. And I was in breakout 3 with Anne and Kathy. So I'd just invite Anne or Kathy to maybe share some of our conversation. Not going to jump in.
I think that we talked a little bit about the sacraments, the classes for sacraments, and I think the one thing I said was some of the kids are not paying attention during the classes, and maybe even bored with the technology a little.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one.
Can you show how I loved your illustration of what they do with the screen?
Oh yeah, like they do this, and then you have no idea what the child's doing because you can't see them, and they're like, "Oh, you can't see me? I'm sorry." And they do this, and they play with the screen, and that's a tough one with the the 12 to 15-year-olds. So.
Mm-hmm. I think we found in a couple of cases where even though you think they're not paying attention and they may appear to not be paying attention, you find out later on that they actually got more than you think they got.
Yes, there are definitely some that do, they're staring off into another area. But I also, they'd be honest with us when we got back together and say, "Oh yeah, we played a game or they're texting each other. Do you see what Mrs. Young did now? Like,
yeah.
So.
I have a grandson that's on 2 or 3 devices at one time, and I think that's more common than you realize.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's that multitasking thing.
They're good at it. They can do it. They're good at it.
Yeah.
David also shared in our group, he came in at the end and shared that sometimes the digital the catechist was just more lecturing. And so they're looking for more interactive things to do. And so, of course, being the sales rep that I am, I put my Christ in Us hat on and shared how interactive Christ in Us is. And hopefully Anita will bring me back. I don't want that to be today's topic, but it's certainly worth, a talk with your DREs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is a good point, Laurel, that we can't, one of the things that I think the directory is really stressing is that we have to change our methodology and not to the point that digital becomes everything. And I've seen some people jump on that bandwagon, and it's not it's going to crash. But it's a tool, and we have to learn how to use it well. And because these people, it's not just a matter of, these are new tools, but there's a different way of learning. And that whole idea that, John, your grandson that can use 3 3 devices at one time. And just my 1-year-old grandson, who's already holding up the remote, if he, the other day we had Pandora on, because when we have him here, we don't have the television, his parents are very adamant about not too much screen time. And so we're not watching TV with him, but when we have Pandora on the television, he'll raise the remote to kind of indicate he wants us to change the music. It's like, wow, how much they're watching, all the time. So it's really a change in shift in methodology.
It's finding a real balance between, what you're doing with them, either in person or in your Zoom meetings live, versus bringing then digital interactive activities or games or videos or whatever it is, but everything can be accessed and shown on the screen. So there are definitely a multitude of ways to bring interactive activities onto a digital classroom. And so it's just finding them and finding the balance between the actual teaching lesson while you're talking and having discussions with the kids, and then also these great activities that we can bring onto our screens as well, or into our classrooms, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Okay. Well, before I move into the second part, any other comments or, questions even about the earlier, what I talked about earlier with the directory? Okay, so let me go back to share my screen here. So when we look at this, one of the key lines in the directory, I think this is really one of the most important lines in the directory when it comes to digital catechesis, that in the process of proclaiming the gospel, the real question is not how to use the new technologies to evangelize, but how to become an evangelizing presence on the digital continent. And that changes the whole dynamic. And it takes the emphasis from the technology to us as evangelizers, and of course that's all framed within this context of the art of accompaniment, which has been really an underlying theme in a very strong way for the papacy of Francis. This is his call to the entire church is to accompany one another. And so that call to accompaniment, the art of accompaniment, is underlying all our efforts as catechists to walk with others. And this beautiful passage from the directory says, this style calls for a humble willingness to allow oneself to be touched by the questions and confronted by the situations of life with a gaze full of compassion, but also respectful of the other's freedom. The new development to which the catechist is called resides in the proximity, in the unconditional acceptance, and in the gratuitousness of with which he makes himself available to walk beside others in order to listen to them and explain the scriptures, without establishing the route in advance, without demanding to see the fruits, and without holding anything back for himself. Now, there's a lot in that passage that I think, and this is 135, paragraph 135 from the directory, which is, earlier than chapter 10. It's about the whole style of accompaniment in the beginning. It's characterized by humility, letting ourselves be touched by questions. It means taking ourselves away from being that lecturer, the teacher, the expert, and being a companion to people, and allowing them the freedom to question, to turn their screens up, to text each other while we're talking. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. And I think Anne, mentioned that discipline online is much trickier than it is in a classroom because you can't see what the students are doing. But we have to really trust in that work of the Spirit to be working through us. And I love, it's really interesting, the term, that the new development calls us to reside in proximity. And this is precisely what was taken away from us because of the pandemic, the proximity to one another, except through screens. And that's been it's been very challenging. I was on a Zoom call one day, and one woman said, it was such a great observation. She says, I've never looked at myself so much as I have this past year, because we're not only looking at, maybe at other people in a Zoom meeting, but we're also seeing ourselves on the screen, and now we can touch ourselves up and do all sorts of things, to make ourselves look a little bit more presentable on the screen. But the proximity is so different. And that's what I know what I've missed terribly. But there is this whole idea to listen first and then explain the scriptures, as it says. And that is really also very challenging. When, one of the things that my daughter had a really hard time with, my little granddaughter, River, goes to a Montessori school, and her teachers have had masks on the whole year. And as Anna said to me, the little children cannot read their teachers' facial expressions. The masking, which is vital to our well-being as a community, has cut off something as well. And so we've got to find ways to kind of move around this. So in calling for this evangelizing presence, how then do we become an evangelizing presence? There's some concrete ways that we can draw from the directory. And one is that it calls for offering spaces for experiences of faith. It's very clear that catechesis cannot simply be digitalized, as it says, but it must offer spaces for sharing one's faith. A lot of people have suffered Zoom fatigue this past year and a half. And in our breakout group, we talked about how parents have been somewhat resistant to putting their kids on a Zoom session for religion after they've been online all day for their academic, studies. And that's very real. And I think it's something that we have to really respect. The lack of in-person contact takes a toll. And even though we're unsure how this is going to work, and I think, I think Kathy said in our group, we're not going back to the way it was really probably ever. Something has radically changed in our culture and our society. Some of this has worked really well. So we may see a lot of hybrid approaches to our religion and ministerial programs. But the fact remains that whatever and however we use digital technology, it must always include something interactive and personal. And it's sad to say, but some of the examples I've seen this past year have simply moved the classroom online, and the catechist has been in this role of a talking head, just lecturing, as Laurel says, and sometimes with very poor camera settings. So part of what we need to do is include time for feedback, discussion, reflection, and other forms of interaction. And digital immigrants are going to be, those of you working with parents, for example, or grandparents or adult, faith formation, may find resistance among the digital immigrants. They don't trust it. They're not sure how to use it. People can turn their cameras off, Now, I've been a public speaker for 40 years, and I've seen some pretty, rude behavior in audiences, but digital really kind of brings us to a new level of that, where people can, turn off their camera and they can be, I've had, I asked a group of catechists one time and catechetical leaders, I think this was for San Diego. I said, what were some of your worst experiences on Zoom? And one of them said, yeah, somebody was making tamales while I was talking. Who was in the kitchen with her camera on making tamales while while this session was going on. And it's like, yeah, just all sorts of things. But we still have to look at how can we do this creatively, get some feedback, using polls and, for example, and trying to use some of these tools when they work. Thank you, Jessica, for getting the chat back up, because, sometimes they fail. But how do we, doing reflection and that sort of thing. I was asked to record a session for the National Catholic Education Association last year because their conference was all online. And it was on the well-being of the Catholic school teacher. And I decided to do it around a retreat. And because it was a recording, and they asked us to keep it short because they said an hour is not going to cut it for these teachers anymore. And so to keep it to 20 minutes. And so I did. It was really one of my most favorite experiences is I took the story of Mary and Martha and kind of broke it open. And because it was recorded and I knew people were watching it at their leisure, I said, why don't you just pause now and take a journal and journal about this and talk to Jesus and talk to Mary and talk to Martha in this story. And I found it incredibly creative as a presenter to do it this way. And it apparently went over very well. So there's all sorts of things that we might be able to consider doing in order to make things more interactive or make those spaces. And another is to chunk what I'd call chunking content to allow space for reflection, questions, and prayers. Laurel mentioned our Christ in Us program. And one of the things that I really love about that is we have a home guide as part of our, as part of the materials. It's if you're not familiar with Christ in Us, it's both digital and print. And so there's kind of this nice blend. We didn't have COVID in mind, of course, when we developed it, but the home guide kind of breaks the lesson out because parents don't have time to sit down for an hour with the child, for example, especially if they have more than one child in their home. So the home guide suggests chunking out the lesson a little bit, starting maybe with the opening video and a conversation with the child, and then taking the opening prayer and doing that as a family around the meal table. And there's that ability to do that in the home over the course of a week so that a lesson isn't just in one session. And that does make for challenges for catechists who might have to spend more time online in smaller pieces. But chunking content allows that space for reflection, for questions, for prayer, to stop periodically. Maybe, and if we are online, to use some Visio Divina, and use some images, which brings us to the second suggestion from the directory. It makes an interesting distinction between personalizing the process and individualizing the process. It's really interesting. This idea of, as I said earlier, my rights, my opinions that has been fed by social media has really led to a lack of regard or understanding for the common good. As the directory states, it is important to help people not to confuse the means with the end, to discern how to navigate online in such a way as to grow as subjects and not as objects, and to go beyond technology in order to recover a humanity renewed in the relationship with Christ. And it uses then as an example the liturgy as the example of drawing together various means of interactivity in engaging the senses. Because the liturgy, and maybe that's why it's been so hard to stream the liturgy, because it is very much an interactive experience. And if I'm sitting in my living room watching, I'm not responding. I'm not standing and sitting and kneeling. I'm not hearing the choir and smelling the incense. Our liturgy, Catholic liturgy, is so sensate. And so how do we do this? In terms of drawing, and using, our senses. And so one of the suggestions that it makes is to draw upon sacred art as a way to connect people with something larger than themselves. I'm, in addition to my other work, I'm also a facilitator for Boston College's Crossroads program. It's a beautiful program. It's been going for years, and it's been an online program for many, since its inception. It uses the platform Canvas. And so what people do to take a course is we have a number of resources that they use, videos. Boston College has so many beautiful videos that they can draw upon. And then you're divided into communities, and the community engages in conversation with one another by posting responses to questions and interacting with one another. Well, right now I'm facilitating a course on St. Mary Magdalene, and it was so popular they had to cut off registration, which was amazing. But one of the questions was about images of Mary Magdalene that was meaningful to people. And I have to say that it has been amazing to watch how the discussion broadened out and how people started interacting. All of a sudden, all these pictures are coming up, and people are posting these images, everything from icons to more, contemporary art around Mary Magdalene. And, it really, what I watched is how it has engendered more conversation. And one of the things that BC tends to do is show little clips from, say, a YouTube clip, or a clip from, they actually have a clip from a film that shows Mary Magdalene, and it gives everybody something common to talk about. So given the highly visual nature of digital natives, the use of art in visual age is vital. And this is where I think you could kind of chunk your lesson a little bit by stopping and showing an image, maybe a photograph. What do you see here? And or use Visio Divina as part of your prayer. So we're not just, up here, but we're really kind of looking at something more, that reaches the heart. And then the third thing is to pose good questions. Good questions have always been an important part of catechesis. But I was looking online, again, such a great gift, digital, of the digital classroom. Like, what are some ideas that teachers have been using in their digital classrooms this past year? And one teacher called it a think, write, share model that she uses with her students. Now, this was just in a regular academic setting, but I thought this is really a wonderful tool. She uses it to pose questions prior to and after showing students a video. Student says questions like, what are we looking at? What makes you say that? What a great question. What do you notice? What do you see? What do you feel? What do you know? It's very Ignatian, actually. The imaginative, entry into gospel stories that St. Ignatius uses as part of his Ignatian contemplation. What more can we uncover? And then my favorite question, what do you wonder? What do you wonder about in this story from the gospel? What do you wonder? What happened to Bartimaeus, for example, after Jesus healed him and gave him back his sight? How did Mary and Martha get along after Jesus left their house that night? Those sort of questions that draw them into something and can maybe expand the conversation. And then, there's a lot of online art, or tools that students can use to create art. They can hold up art or images that they're very adept at uploading pieces as well. And so utilizing tools of technology to further study, to find information, generate new experiences, and stimulate creativity. And And this is really fabulous. I was at my doctor's office. I went to have an eye exam yesterday. And while I was waiting in the outer area, I was reading a lengthy article about manor houses in Britain. It was from the New Yorker. And so, page after page of text. And while I was reading it, I was able to take out my phone and look up the house that they were describing in this article. And they were, describing, a piece of furnishing in the house. And I was able to find it online, sitting in my doctor's office. It's amazing. This is an example of the at our fingertips information that's available to us. We can take a virtual tour, complete with Gregorian chant of the Sistine Chapel. We can find a quote from a saint around a particular topic. We can set up a presenter from Colorado with you in upstate New York. Isn't it fabulous on a Saturday morning? And so, Laurel mentioned our tools in our Christ in Us program. One of the things that I love about this program, we have little videos that the kids watch, but at the end of every lesson, they're asked to fill or to do something called a mini task. And they started in their books, but they have something called a portfolio, and they go online and they create this, they continue their mini task. I so wish that I could move around the country and discover what some of these kids have done, because they're so creative at young ages. But this is from the 4th grade book. And their mini task is to review a vision. They're to make a vision board. Now it says, review the happiness vision board you designed in your student book. So that's where they start. And a catechist may say, that's as much as I want to do. But the child has the option to go online into their portal, and they can expand their mini task. And it says here, share your vision with others by recording a How to Be Happy tutorial for students your age. Again, this is 4th grade. Your video should include steps to be happy and ways to lead a happy, healthy, joy-filled life. Now, this is linked with a lesson on prayer. And what I've done is I've kind of clipped out these are different pages. But this is the illustration. The little girl with the kite is part of that. And you can see up on the left-hand side, the process that they review their task that started in their book. They make a plan. And when they hit that little plan button, it will take them into this lower box where they get tips for creating a video. They can hit that, give them all sorts of ideas. They also have a graphic organizer, a storyboard to plan their video. My son is a video editor. He just ended up some programs with DreamWorks. And so he's the first one who told me about storyboards, that how when they create a program or a movie, they create storyboards first. And we've got 4th graders doing this. It's so amazing. Then they actually do it. And there's all sorts of tools that they can use when they clip, go in and they create their task. And then they upload it so that the catechist sees it, the catechetical leader can see it, and the parent can see it. And then at the end, and this is a very important piece of this, is they reflect on it. It's kind of like a so what question. What does this mean to me in my faith? And too often we're using video tools, digital tools, without going to that 4th step, without reflecting on what has this taught me? What does this mean? How does this expand my understanding of my faith in Jesus Christ and my role as a disciple of Jesus? So Laurel, I don't know whether you have anything else to add to the mini task, but I think it's such a wonderful example of the interactivity and the use of digital tools. Any thoughts on that, Laurel, or did I kind of cover that?
You covered it well, but I just think it's important to emphasize that the mini task is more than just the test. Like in Christ in Us, we have the lesson test, and we have the unit test, and we have the show what you know questions that can be used for discussion. But the mini task is a more authentic way of assessing whether or not the children learned this lesson, and not just that they could regurgitate back what you taught them, but how can I take what I learned in this lesson and go out and live this lesson in my life? And how did learning about this teach me to share my faith with others and be a witness to my faith? So that's really what the mini tasks do, is they take it out of the classroom and into the world. And it's really fun. They could be as simple as create, for a first grader, the mini task might be, when they learned about the Bible, create the cover of a Bible, and here are some key components that should be included in it to create a public service announcement. Go out and do something with your family, and what DREs that have used this are doing then is using these mini tasks as family events, and every once in a while, every few months, bringing the families in together or sharing on Zoom some families that did incredible jobs with their children on some of these mini tasks. And a lot of them are not even done individually by the student, but actually creating mini tasks as a family, which is really evangelizing. So that's all I want to share.
Thank you. That's really important. And I think that is such a good point, that no matter what we're doing, we can get caught up in the tools, and forget the task. And, if it doesn't lead to something broader, to some kind of application to our lives, then we're just kind of caught up in the bells and whistles. And we've lost sense of the real heart of where catechesis is. And that's a big piece of it to me, that is a caution around digital technology. It is very attractive, and we can be very tempted to entertain students, but lose that idea of what are we actually doing. And that's why I think it's really vital what Laurel's saying, that it's not just a matter of regurgitating back what they heard from the catechist, but that they're really showing that they understand it and comprehend it, but also can apply it to their lives. And that's really vital. So thank you for that. This, when you look at this can be really intimidating for those of us who are not, who are really digital immigrants. We're really kind of getting a handle on it. But we have to consider that for these children right now, this is their language. This is what they're doing. When you look at the stuff they're doing in their schools, in the public schools or Catholic schools, I mean, it's amazing. So this, and they're able, what I love about this is in the actual doing part, there's all these tools that they have. They can upload videos, they can record videos, they can draw a picture, using the tools. It's such a different sort of way to learn and participate than just filling in blanks in a book. And so we don't have to learn it all. And that's what I think is really vital. I find in my own life, I'm picking and choosing what I have time for these days. But learning something new is a great gift. And I think that is, really the question is, how are we making use of technology to expand our skills and enhance our catechetical efforts? So let me just stop there and invite us again to go back into our groups, and just ask these questions. Maybe you could chat about these. What new experiences of faith sharing have you seen or initiated due to digital technology? Not just due to the pandemic, but prior to that, maybe, or what you've seen. I mean, I already learned about a new one today, just about communications. That's great. In what ways might digital technology or catechesis be used to connect with a larger community of faith? Vital question that the directory is posing. And name a creative use of technology that expands the catechetical process.
Works.
All right. Well, welcome back. I'm going to start in the reverse this time and ask Ann or Kathy to share something from breakout room 3 about our conversation. I wonder, Kathy, if you could just speak a little bit about your the challenges around RCIA, because we've talked a lot about working with kids, but I mean, you're doing, this work with adults, and
Right.
that's worth talking about.
We this year we have a candidate for RCIA, and she is Catholic already, so that's good. But however, she stopped right after First Communion, so she's got a ways to go. Her boyfriend is hopefully someday going to be her husband, wife, whatever. And we actually are trying to figure out how we're going to do this. If we have to do it online, it might be easier with an adult online, because she really wants to do it, so she's more apt to pay attention. We can have different hours if we need to. However, the only thing wrong with that is we've always had the mass as part of our class. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is we have, I'm in the Norfolk Church, and there's two RCIA leaders, or whatever, not leaders, but our group. There's 2 in Norwood, and there's 2 in Brazier, and our priest covers the 3 churches. So he's thinking that, well, go 2 days, this month go with this group, next month go with this group, and the following month go with this group, so they get a more rounded opinion of the church and people's way of learning. I'm not so sure we're going to be able to do it that way. I think it'll get really confusing, although it'd be more confusing if you were doing it in person.
Yeah, and I was struck with what you said, Kathy, about how you're really going to have to cobble together, in a sense, your own program around it. Yeah.
There are some programs out there, but we've never relied on just a program, because it's that personal faith that really gets through, I think, to your RCIA candidates. Mm-hmm. I can sit there and lecture all day, but that's not what they need. They need to be able to say, oh, her faith is so strong. I understand where she's coming from, and so on. Because a lot of people, I've had a lot of RCIA candidates, and they've all had different reasons for wanting to go through the process. So we've had some that never finished the process, and we have some that haven't even started it yet. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. But there is some resources, but like I said, it's we're going to have to put together our own in order to get all the components that we want into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I was just saying that what we've seen kind of nationally is a lot of people dropping out of catechesis because they don't want to learn these new technologies. They're not comfortable with this this approach, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work
and time. So
she's a college student, so I know she's going to college, and it's so even that's going to be a challenge, trying to arrange the classes in with her classes that she's taking at college. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Big.
One thing we're doing for RCIA this year is, Father Scott and I talked. We didn't have any candidates, so I went through our census because we confirm in 9th grade. So from the high school, went through to see which ones did their baptism and First Communion, and I think we had 14 kids, and it was actually 6 families. So there's only one that wasn't siblings, and we offered them a chance to go through the RCIA from when we start September 19th, come to Mass at 4, and then go down in our church hall for classes, and they can be confirmed on Pentecost. So we're just going to, put it out there, and we kind of gave them a little bullet that they need to be confirmed if they ever want to be a godparent or a sponsor for confirmation.
What ages are you talking about?
High school.
High school.
9th through 12th. And it'd be a nice group. And like I said, we're hoping they'll bite on it because, like I said, some of them are siblings. We have one family that has 3 that could do it. And so it might be a nice, and throwing it out there is one thing we're trying this year.
Deb, it strikes me that it's a different approach for us as Catholics, because we often wait for people to come to us.
Exactly. I know.
You're initiating that.
We're going to try, because I said, it's sad when you don't see them after First Communion.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Give them a chance, meet them where they are. And we're going to do it Saturday night, because even on Sundays now, like I was telling John, you have sports that you're always, conflicting with, and they can't come to morning mass. And so maybe they can go to the mass Saturday night, stay for, 45 minutes afterwards, and they can still be confirmed come Pentecost.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know that DREs also use the baptism record to remind parents when students are going to be, when their children, we know the children are entering first grade, that it's time to register for religious ed.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Oh, see, we take children from as soon as they're toilet trained, they can come. So we have a lot of small kids, which is fine because they actually love it. So, and it's a good program for them. I mean, there's no structured program per se, other than we do readings, a gospel reading for them, their age group. And, usually coloring sheets or a puzzle or something like that.
Yeah.
Story. I've taught all the grades.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Breakout room 2. Could somebody speak to your conversation? And
Anita?
Well, I'll mention one of the things. Well, one of the questions was, what new experience of faith have you had that you've used, or what ways to connect to the larger community? Even before, this whole COVID thing, I was part of a Bible study group that integrated video. So it wasn't just, reading the scripture and reading the commentary, but it had already, the program was pre-designed and incorporated the video. So it was a good way to not just listen to ourselves, but kind of have the experts give the overview of what the lesson was and what the themes were and that sort of thing. So that's actually something that was very popular with, we'll call the immigrants, because again, it was somewhat traditional, but it started to incorporate, some of the new things too. So there's a lot of those types of programs. And I think we're seeing that too more and more, where it's not just you, the presenter, but there's interaction between a video, the presenter, and discussion. So those things are typically embraced by a larger audience. So we're trying to do some of those things too.
Wonderful. That's great. Yeah, it is true that, this isn't just started this past year, but we've been on this track for a while now and seen some creative things come out. So, yeah. Laurel, were you going to add something?
No, I was just seeing if Anita wanted to talk. I shared in our group that my parish in particular has, they put up giant TV screens. And so now all the readings and every response, the Our Father, the Gloria, the words for every song, the Psalms, everything is up on the screen. And I find that, and they're not bringing the books back. So they're saving now on books. It is amazing, the participation in Mass, especially the increased participation of children responding and singing the songs, because they don't have to fumble around with books anymore. So, I mean, that's been a real positive for our parish.
Yeah.
Well, did you find any resistance to that from some traditional Catholic people at first before they installed the screens and things like that? Was there a lot of discussion?
You know what, John? I moved here during the pandemic. So we actually were shopping around. I hate to say it, parishes. We moved during the pandemic to Barnegat. And when we got here, we tried 3 different churches. And when we saw this, we were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We love it here. And when the people came back to the pews and took off the masks, the books didn't come back. And this is the way it's going to stay. And I don't know. But it was one of the main reasons my husband and I chose this parish, because we love the digital about it. So I can't answer that.
Yeah, yeah. And isn't that interesting? I mean, it will attract some people. And as you said, John, some people will not.
Yes.
Yeah. It's always going to be that balance. Yeah, that mix. So, okay, breakout room number 1. Any comments from any of you or conversation?
I already jumped in on the RCIA part of it.
Okay. That's all right. You can jump in again.
I'll let John talk.
Okay.
Well, basically, we just talked about some of the challenges and things with the digital and some of the. It seems to me too that in a way, using the videos and things like that, we started doing it before the pandemic and everything too, because the experts, like you guys said, can articulate the faith and things like that better than we can in person. And just like now I'm stumbling for words. That's how I am in RCIAs and Catechesis as well. So if you could have somebody explain everything, that way you don't miss anything, and then discuss it afterwards, seems to work out really well.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, as and then just to wrap up, anybody have any questions, pending questions, maybe about the directory, or any thoughts about what you want to take away from today? That you want to learn about, or any closing comments, I guess, is what I'm asking before we kind of close out. So I know it's been kind of a long morning, so I don't want to keep you too long, but I will say right away that I am not your go-to person for coming up with lots of new digital pieces of technology. But I think what I'm hearing from all of you and in our conversations is you've all kind of stuck with it, rode this kind of wave through the past year, and I think the thing about the directory that I really appreciate is that and I mentioned that with the storytelling, we have tools that are new, but our process is very old. And I think if I wanted you to take away anything, it would be that line in the directory that it's not how we use the tools to evangelize, it's how we are an evangelizing presence. And there is no substitution for the presence of the catechist. And the fact that another document that came out much shorter, but very, very important, was Pope Francis's letter, or document that named catechists as a ministry. And we've all, I think, taken that to heart ourselves in our own ways. But this kind of official stamp of this is a bona fide ministry in the church, like a lector or an acolyte or whatever. This is really important. A few months ago, I was asked by the Diocese of Brooklyn to do an online session with their catechist, and what they asked me to talk about, it was very striking, was the director said to me, it's hard for our catechists to understand that they need to share something of themselves and with their students. And I was very taken with that. And that's what she asked me to address. And the directory talking about the catechist as a storyteller, as someone who walks with, someone who accompanies people, that is never going to be old or outdated. It is really the heart of what we do as catechists. And I can see within this gathering here how you are doing that. And so I just want to thank you for being here today and taking the time to be with us. I'm just going to throw up my email if you have any follow-up questions you want to send to me, and then certainly get a hold of Laurel because she can provide you with all sorts of wonderful resources to support you in your ministry. So that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Laurel and then Anita, for your closing comments. So.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you everyone for joining us. Again, my contact information is there on the screen. Thank you, Kathy, for providing that as well. And if you need ideas of how to digitally engage, make your digital classrooms more engaging, or even your physical classrooms more engaging, Sadler has a whole 2 different series that we use. We have We Believe, we have Christ in Us, which has more digital. We have Believe, Celebrate, Live for the 3 sacraments. And, I already shared my webinar or my workshop on engaging kids in the classroom with the Diocese of Ogdensburg over I guess it was 2 years ago now I did that, but I just did it again this week for a parish here in New Jersey. So if you need ideas or you want samples or you want to check out the digital, a free trial, take a free trial for a couple months, I'm the person to call. So I look forward to working with all of you. And I want to thank Anita and Kathy for inviting us today.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Thank
again,
you.
yeah, I think you guys have said it all. I'm very, very pleased with this. I think there was a lot of great discussion, a lot of great ideas. As you said, Kathy, we do have dedicated people, and it is ourselves that we bring, to all of the students that come before us. So that presence, that personal touch, that engagement, the storytelling, when all else is said and done, that's still the very, critically important piece, no matter what bells and whistles we use. So we use the bells and whistles to attract them, but we still need to, bring that piece of ourselves to them. So thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great day. Take this information back, certainly, to your groups. We did record this, so we'll send out information next week on how to, if you have any catechists or catechetical leaders or other people that you think can benefit by this, we'll let you know if we have to get in touch either through Jessica or myself or Kathy, and we'll work that out. But thank you all, and God bless, and have a great day.
Mm-hmm. Thank
we'll
you.
Be in touch.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
Jessica.
Bye.